Hello, I'm Dr. Alicia Power.
And I'm Dr. Maria Kang, and welcome to Growing Healthy,
a podcast about pregnancy, pediatrics, and beyond. Hey Maria.
Hi Alicia.
Do you remember those first few days after having your first baby?
I sure do.
I don't really. They were all a bit of a blur. But today's episode is all about what women wish they'd known about the first few days about having their baby. But before we get into that, here's a little reminder. The Growing Healthy podcast and website is meant for general medical information only. This does not apply to every situation, and should you have questions, or if you have received different advice, please contact your healthcare provider.
The views expressed by Growing Healthy and our guests are not representative of any institution with which we are affiliated. Okay, Alicia, I know that you are doing postpartum group visits, which I think is just invaluable. You reached out to some new moms, and here's the top 5 things they had to say about what they wish they knew about in those first few days after having their baby.
Breastfeeding. Wouldn't it be nice if, just like in the movies, you just pulled your shirt on, slapped that baby on the boob, and everything was magical?
That's not how it happens?
It's not how it happens. This, we need to remind ourselves, is a new skill set for both mom and baby, and it takes some time for both of those partners to learn how to breastfeed. A lot of women get discouraged, but really, you need to try to just remember that this is a new skill set and it takes time to learn. And make sure you ask for help if your latch is painful. There's many places that you can get help. In Victoria, there's public health clinics. At our clinic at Grow Health, we have lactation consultants working with us. Most of the docs have a basic idea of breastfeeding, although it's not a strong point in any of our training, but most of us have worked on that given what we do. And we can help improving that latch early on to help minimize the damage to your nipples. In terms of the actual process of breastfeeding, milk generally comes in around day 2 after vaginal delivery and day 3 after cesarean section. It can be a wee bit on the dramatic side and uncomfortable on your breasts, as they've probably never been that large before or that full. And this milk coming in can also affect your latch. So in those first few days, you may feel like you've got a great latch and it's all easy, and then your milk comes in. And it can make it a little bit more challenging for babies to latch on at that point. So again, make sure to ask for help if you're struggling. Some women certainly find that if they express some milk or they pump some milk off, it can relieve some of that discomfort and also soften the nipple to make the latch a little bit easier for their babies. Babies differ dramatically in how often they feed and how much they need. What do you usually advise women on kind of what's a normal for that baby in that first few days postpartum?
Yeah, first few days of life, you really want to focus on every 2 to 3 hours and then going with what your baby determines. You generally don't want to go more than every 4 hours, just especially in the first few days of life, because most moms are not really sure how much milk they're actually producing. And you know, you're a new mom, you're just not sure how much baby should take. So just sticking to every 2 to 3 hours in the first few days of life, and then asking good questions for your maternity care provider.
And women are often surprised at how long those feeds take in those early days. They can take up to an hour often to get the baby on and to burp the baby and then to switch breasts. So remember, those guidelines of how often to feed your baby are from the start of one feed to the start of the next feed.
That's a good point.
Thank you. It's come up a few times. And as baby grows, this improves over time. Babies get more efficient. You figure out how to latch babies. So that time you're breastfeeding often decreases dramatically. And on our next podcast, we'll talk a little bit more about how to know how much your baby is getting and the signs to watch out for. So let's focus on mom today. And the other thing about the letdown is it can be dramatic. So this is when your breasts release that milk and allow it into baby. And this is not right away. It can often take a few seconds for this to happen. But let me tell you, you may leak that precious milk anywhere. And I've just learned of a couple of products that I wish I had known about. One of them is called the Haakaa. It's out of New Zealand, Haakaa. And this is actually a suction kind of device that you put on your nipple that will help to catch that letdown and catch that milk that would otherwise be going into a breast pad. And then you can use that later or store it for a later date to give to your baby. The other one is Milkies. This doesn't have the suction component, but same idea. So you put it on your nipple while you know you're going to be nursing it, and we'll catch that letdown and save it for later.
That's a really good point because, I didn't have a lot of successful attempts at breastfeeding, and we tried for a very long time. But the letdown, it was always interesting. I didn't know how that worked when you're breastfeeding your baby on one side. I mean, then the other nipple is flowing out at the same time, and you're just looking at that precious milk and going, I don't want to lose that. That's a good point.
And the other point is, the good thing that most women don't know about right at the beginning is breast pads. And so these are kind of absorbent pads. You can get disposable ones or reusable ones that you just wash with all of your laundry you're doing anyways. And you put that in your bra, and then you save a few bras, a few t-shirts,
Yes.
a little bit of embarrassment when you hear other babies crying and you have that letdown response.
Isn't that a weird thing? It's a weird thing your body does.
Another really important thing around breastfeeding is it takes a lot of your energy and it takes a lot of your fluids. So making sure that you're getting those extra calories. And we're talking about 500 extra calories to create the food your baby needs. And all of that extra fluid, if it's not going in your body, can cause some constipation. So making sure you're keeping your bowels nice and regular with lots of water and add in a little bit of prune juice to the mix.
There's a lot of stuff going on in your body to produce that milk. It's amazing how much you can go through in terms of calories and fluid.
Yeah, I remember my lovely sister-in-law saying with her first baby that, keep at it. If you're struggling, keep at it because every week gets better. So if breastfeeding is a priority for you, just keep at it. It's not going to be for everybody, and that's okay. As long as you feed your baby, that's the most important thing. So yes, we do bleed after a delivery, regardless of whether it's a vaginal delivery or a cesarean section. You can often have a heavy-like period for 2 to 5 days after a delivery, and then it gradually decreases over the following few weeks. You may notice that it simmers down in the hospital, but when you go home, it picks up a little bit, and that's just because you're generally more active when you're at home. You're not just lying in bed in the hospital learning how to take care of your baby, and that's totally normal. And the bleeding is because your uterus is trying to get back down to its normal size. So if you think of it, the uterus has been housing your baby and it needs to get down to something the size of smaller than your fist over the next 4 to 6 weeks. So oftentimes you might notice when you're breastfeeding and that oxytocin, that love drug is being released, it actually causes your uterus to cramp down. And so you can get a little bit of a heavier flow while you're breastfeeding. And if you stand up, you may notice that you're passing some clots, and that can be totally normal as long as you're not having heavy bleeding after you've passed those clots. And heavy bleeding is soaking a pad hourly, once an hour for 3 to 4 hours. That's considered heavy bleeding. And if that's the case, certainly you need to let your care provider know sooner rather than later. Another thing about kind of that postpartum bleeding vagina area is that we usually recommend that we don't put anything in the vagina for 4 to 6 weeks afterwards. And so you are going to need to use pads. Those pads can get irritating, especially the ones with the plastic mesh on them. So as your flow gets a little bit lighter, you may want to switch over to a reusable pad for some people, or a cotton pad without the mesh covering, just to be a little bit more gentle in your vagina. Another thing about vaginas is you want to take care of yours. So using a peri bottle or the squeeze bottles that you'll often get in the hospital when you're kind of urinating is a good idea. And
Wait,
it's also
what's a peri bottle?
it's a peri bottle. It's like a little squeeze bottle. It looks like a water bottle. You get it in the hospital after delivery, and it just helps to kind of keep the area, your vagina, nice and clean. And also if you've had some stitches, then it helps the urine when you're peeing off of those stitches. So you kind of squeeze it when you're peeing, and it just helps that healing.
But you're not like squeezing it up there though.
No, just on the
Got
general area.
Great.
Another thing that people find useful is having little Epsom salt baths after a couple times a day if you can. So you just put some warm water in a bathtub and fill it with Epsom salts, and then it just kind of helps keep things clean and heal up a little bit easier. Mood can often be a challenging thing in that postpartum time. It's a huge transition for you, for your partner, for your relationship with your families. You've got all those hormones coursing through your body, and your body has gone through something huge, both physically and emotionally, and it can take its toll. Often women experience some element of the baby blues, crying for no reason, feeling overwhelmed, and usually day 4 or 5 is when it's at its peak. But that in a normal baby blues should resolve over the next following few days. Some women it takes a much bigger toll on, and that's when we start getting into postpartum depression or anxiety. Certainly if you're finding that you're struggling, if you're not enjoying your baby, if you're extremely frustrated, then we really want you to ask for help. Some advice for helping to kind of keep the situation under control is to try not to have too many visitors in those first few days. And if they do come to visit, put them to work. I don't know what you found, Maria, but most people who came to visit actually wanted to be helpful rather than just sitting and chatting.
That's a good point. When I meet new moms in particular and they tell me all the different people that are visiting, from out of town, I often ask them, that's wonderful because babies are beautiful and a joyous thing in life, but are these people being helpful? Personally, yeah, it was always helpful just to have neighbors and friends come by to either clean the house or make a meal. That was the most amazing part to having my first time baby. But again, the visitors are great if they're helpful, and so that's a good question I always bring up with new moms.
Also, you'll notice that everybody has their advice. Some people tell you you are doing it incorrectly. Some people are more supportive. So, making sure that you and your partner have a discussion prior to delivery about what your parenting goals are, what you can do to help each other and support each other, and how you can help and support each other with dealing with people who may not be the most supportive during that period.
Yeah, that's true.
Whether that's parents or siblings or friends or acquaintances, you really need your partner to have your back during this time and help speak up for you when you are feeling overwhelmed.
That's a good point. It's hard when you have just had your baby and you're tired and your body is feeling strange, and the last thing you want to deal with is either family or friends that are not being supportive and not making you very comfortable. It's wonderful to have a partner that you've already communicated with, saying, "Look, I really need you to step up here because I'm exhausted."
So some people can certainly feel alone and that they're the only person who's going through this in their time. And that's not the case. This time is a challenging time, a wonderful time, but a challenging time for most new moms out there. Certainly, if you're looking for resources or to hear other people's story, there's a website called postpartumconfession.com. It'll be in our show notes. And something that you can access just to realize that you're not alone in this if you are struggling, and to make sure that you're talking to your friends and your families, that you're talking to your care provider if you're struggling and asking for help, because there are resources out there.
That's such an important thing to realize that you aren't alone. There are so many people who have gone through exactly what you've gone through, even though it probably doesn't feel that way. But reaching out can be the hardest thing and the best thing to do, especially in the first few days after having your baby.
Sleep. Oh, sleep.
What's that?
When was the last time you slept through the night?
Oh, my kids are older now, so they sort of sleep.
Now they get up to pee at 3 a.m.
That's right.
So in the first few days, usually the first night after you have your baby's tired, and that will be the most sleep you're going to probably get for a few weeks anyways, and that's okay. And that's totally normal. For the first 4 to 6 weeks, babies tend to sleep more during the day and less at night. Not every baby follows these rules, but certainly this is the vast majority. So certainly when your baby's napping during the day, do your best to sleep when you can. During the first few weeks, you're going to need to ask for help. So get a plan with your partner to try and get at least a couple 3 to 5 hour chunks a week of sleep if you can. The more the better. This may entail your partner taking your baby and either quickly bringing baby into you to do a quick breastfeed while you're kind of lying in bed and getting a few hours of sleep, or if you've got some extra pumped milk, they can give a bottle, or if you use formula, give some formula. But giving each other the opportunity to get a couple of good hour chunks of sleep a day would be lovely, but a week would be nice as well.
That's a good point. They always say you should sleep when your baby sleeps, but it's hard to do that when you're constantly just thinking about your baby while your baby's sleeping. How do you sleep? So I love that idea of having either family or friend or your partner actually take the baby for a couple of hours between feeds, because then you can actually sleep and not be so concerned about what's going on with your baby while you're trying to sleep as well.
The amount of times that I got up to check my baby's breathing when they were sleeping is incredible.
Exactly. And, Alicia, we're both physicians and we should, be more confident. But, a mom is a mom, and having your first baby in particular is very stressful. So those things are universal.
So I think the most important piece of advice I've heard from women is focus on your priorities. This is a really important time in your life. And this is a very challenging time in your life, an amazing time in your life. Don't worry about the laundry. You can get takeout for every single meal if you need to. Your floors are going to get dirty, and that's all okay. Your job is to focus on your family and get things off to the best start you can. Like we said earlier, like Maria suggested, get your helper bees in to cook you some meals, or if you're a good planner, do it before baby and freeze them. Ask for gift certificates at your baby showers to restaurants that you
Oh,
like,
that's a great idea.
because this is a time that you're going to really need to focus on your baby and your family and really kind of keeping yourself healthy and strong. And really, a lot of these things that are inconsequential in the grand scheme of things can wait.
Like the paint in the baby's room, or the stroller, or the stuff. There's so much stuff that you can buy, but really in those first few days to weeks, you need a baby box that's safe for your baby to sleep in, and you need rest.
Yeah, so that is our advice for today. Coming up soon, we'll talk about the 5 top things you wish you knew about your baby.
Great.
Maria will be spearheading that. And we will talk to you soon.
Keep growing healthy.